Radio Split Ranch.
Hello and welcome once again to Radio Split Ranch, a monthly visit with the Capital Region's great radio personalities of the past and sometimes present. I'm Warren Garling when I'm not on the radio. And our opening theme was created, composed, and performed by a musician known by just one real name, and that's Drew Jacobs. Drew is even more creative when writing great parodies, like the ones found on his CD, Selfie Absorbed. At drewjacobs.com, you can purchase that and other offerings. Please do, because I didn't pay him a dime for creating our theme. Our victim this month at the Radio Split Ranch is another veteran broadcaster who's still active in the business and that I had the pleasure of working with for almost 20 years. She tells us she's hardly met a radio format she didn't like in her 34 years on regional radio, but you're going to recognize her from 22 years as morning host on 98.3 WTRY. Here's my sit down with the delightful Jaime Roberts. Welcome, Jaime. Thank you for joining us.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you.
I am thrilled because, first of all, you're still an active, radio pronouncer,
yes,
which I'm happy to always have somebody that's active in the business at the moment so we can get that unique perspective. But also because you're the first young lady I've had in here.
Really?
Yeah. And,
wow.
and I don't know why, but it just turned out that way.
Okay.
And there was another reason as well that I'm happy that you're here. Well, it'll come to me. Anyway,
we've known each other a long time, but we haven't seen each other in a long time.
Well, that's true, too. So we are going to catch up a little bit, obviously, yeah. But I will be interested in your take on the difference between when you started and where we are now. So we'll get to that as we get to where we are now.
Okay.
But let's go back. Way back.
Tumbling back.
and the first inkling that you had that, maybe it might be fun to be on the radio, was it one of the first things you wanted to do in life, or did it come about, strangely? Tell me about that.
I knew from the time I was a kid I wanted to do something in entertainment.
Oh, okay.
But never in my wildest dreams did I think that I could be on the radio. It just seemed, because when we were growing up, like, certainly much more than now, like the mostly men, there were some women, but the mostly men who were on the radio were like stars to us. Like,
oh, yeah.
It might as well be Brad Pitt, you know.
Right.
It's just what it was. When we called the radio station to make a request, it was, I got the DJ. I'm talking to the actual DJ,
Exactly.
So I didn't even think that it was a possibility, but I always knew I wanted to do something in entertainment. But keep in mind, I also grew up at a time when women were not expected to really go to college. I grew up in a very classic Italian family.
Okay. Was that local? Are you a local girl?
Local. I'm a Troy girl.
Okay.
I'm a Troy girl. And so it was not expected that my life route was supposed to be, I will graduate from high school, I will work as a secretary for the state, I will get married, I will have a family, and until I die. That will be
I
my
married
life.
One of those girls.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what she thought her life was going to be as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, about 6 months into my life as a secretary for the state, I decided this is so not the life path that I want. Yeah. And, through a series of things, I left the state. I went to work for what was then the drinking driver program and ran that for a couple of years in Schenectady. But none of it, I didn't hate it, but it wasn't what I wanted. There was no passion in my belly for this.
Now, in high school, were you an actor and that sort of thing?
I did some of the shows, Oklahoma and things like that that we put on in high school. Really, I enjoyed that. I loved being on stage,
Sure. Yeah, me too.
And it was just so much fun. And none of it felt, I can remember some of my friends saying, oh, but you got to go to rehearsal. Like, none of that was hard. Like, I didn't feel like, oh gosh, I'm losing out on sleep. Like, who cares? Look at what I'm doing,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I work for the state. I leave there. I work for the drinking driver program. I leave there. I work for the Ellis Hospital Day Treatment Program in the field of alcoholism. None of it was lighting a fire in my belly. I'm about 24 at this point, and I find out that the day treatment program is closing.
Oh, boy.
And I'm like, okay, I got to find a gig. I look through the paper, and I see this ad for the New School.
New School of Contemporary Radio.
That's right,
yes.
right. I'm like, well, you know what? let me just check it out.
Sure.
What's the worst thing that could happen? I go check it out.
Exactly.
So I make an appointment with Charlie Mertz, God bless him.
Oh, yeah.
And I go down there one night, and not a lie, Warren, I walk into the building, and you walk down, was when it was on Colvin. You walk down the stairs, and I opened the door, and I knew from the minute I opened that door,
really,
this is what I have to do.
Wow, yeah.
This is what I was meant to do.
There you go. Yeah.
And, I did my audition and was admitted and, did my 10 weeks at the school. But before I even graduated, I had a job. And
nice, yeah.
The rest.
We had quite I say we because I worked there for about 5 years. We had quite the placement system. We really did place about better than 95% of our students got a first job.
Yes.
Now, whether or not it went on to a second job, I think the percentages came down quite a bit after that.
Right.
Because if I listened back then, I wasn't hearing the people after a few weeks. Some of the students I was very proud of, and others that I kind of knew it wasn't going to work. They were going to find something else to do. We may have been their third or fourth vocational, education they'd had, right. But anyway, so where did it lead you? Where did you go?
So before I graduated, I got a job at what was then WVKZ.
Oh, yeah.
Power Rock 96.7.
Okay.
Capital Land's power ship has landed. That's what it was. That was our tag.
Now, where were they located?
They were located on State Street in Schenectady.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got a job there doing what started out as weekend overnights, and within a week I was doing overnights.
Whoa. Yeah, nice. Now, wasn't that the sister station to the old WSNY or 3WD?
Yes,
okay, 1240.
3WD.
Yeah, where I started. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was all the thing was, it was all music that I never listened to. It was all heavy metal and hard rock, and I was a pop soft rock girl from way back.
A Cher lady.
But as a Cher lady, that's right. But as I was taught at the new school, you're not going to listen to your favorite music. You're going for a gig.
It's true.
And so, I took that to heart, and I took the job, and I was in heaven. I mean, just
the hours didn't matter. The pay didn't matter.
Nope.
It's that's what happens to us. The people that stay in it forever, that's what happens. We just get immediately grabbed by it, and it won't let go.
And it's completely true, because I was also working a 9-to-5 job as a production assistant at what was then Channel 55 over in Scotia.
Okay.
But so I would work from 9 to 5, come home and sleep for a couple hours, then go work midnight to 6.
Wow.
Go home, sleep for an hour, take a shower, get up, work 9 to 5.
Wow.
I did that because, so I worked at WVKZ and very much enjoyed it. Met great people, Frank Turk and Julian Starr, the late Julian Starr, Nikki Donovan, were all there.
Cool.
Yeah, really good people.
And what year is this we're talking about?
This is 88.
Okay.
Gotcha. Mid 88, I guess. Well, early to mid 88.
Okay.
But within 3 months of working there, I got a call from John Knott over at K-Light at the time.
Yeah.
Asking me to come on over and talk to him, and I did, and he ended up hiring me. And that was, this is the kind of music I always wanted to work with, so of course I'm going to take this gig.
Sure.
So I was working weekends and overnights and filling in basically for anybody who had time off.
Nice.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. We did the late night love songs and all, it was fun.
And what was he like to work for?
John was great.
Yeah.
Can I tell you, John was the nicest.
Yeah.
I'll never forget on one of I did overnight, obviously my first couple of shifts there were overnights, but I was doing a Saturday afternoon shift. It was one of my first daytime shifts there. And the whole staff was together for some reason doing something, which is why they gave me the daytime shift.
Why you had the shift, yeah.
And I'll never forget, I'm like an hour and a half into my shift and the hotline rings. And, you're panic stricken.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
God,
the first
what did
thing
I
that
do?
happens. Exactly.
And I answered the phone, and it was John, and he said, I don't want you to get nervous or anything. I just wanted to call and tell you that we're all listening, and you're doing a great job.
Whoa.
And I just thought that was just the kind of,
Yeah.
here I am all these years later. I've never forgotten it.
Yes.
It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Didn't have to do it. Mm-hmm. He was, probably having fun and, knocking back a drink or two or whatever. But he took the time to do it. So he was just a really nice, good man.
No, one of the positive guys, one of the guys that, from everything I've heard from folks that have worked for him, it was always a positive reinforcement. It was a way, that, okay, well, that was good. Maybe this way's better. That sort of, PD.
Always started with a positive. Always.
Sure.
Just a good guy. So I was working there, and I was probably there for about 5 months, maybe 6 months. And Tommy Hahn at the new school gave me a call and said, well, Fly is looking for somebody, a weekender on Fly. And I think that'll be a good fit for you. And I said, all right. He said, I think you have a better chance of being bumped up to full-time at Fly.
There you go.
Than you do at K-Light, because everybody at that time was
pretty stable.
Pretty stable.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, well, I'll take the advice. And so I went over to Fly during the day when I was working my daytime job. And, I was there. I interviewed with Mike Shadow Michaels at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And he listened to my tape in front of me, and I, wanted to die 1,000 deaths, because none of us ever want to hear ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I made the mistake once at WJIB in Boston after auditioning there, doing a little bit of segue stuff and then a newscast. And I made the mistake. They asked me, said, you want to listen back to what the tape sounds like, This is before I didn't have an air check to bring them from my college station at the time. And I said, yeah, sure. Well, they play it back, and I realize that I'm hearing some stray noise, and I can't figure out what it is. And I said, what's that clicking noise going on? That's the Neumann's mic picking up your dryness in your mouth.
Oh, no.
And I thought to myself, well, now I know why I'm not going to get the job, because I didn't even think to bring water, or to ask for a glass of water. It was before bottled water,
right?
Sure, and I never thought to do it. I was so nervous and so dry that you could actually hear my tongue hitting,
clicking,
in my mouth. Yeah, it was crazy. So I never did that again. If anybody ever asked me, you want to hear that again? No. You listen to it later. Call me and tell me I got the job. Yeah, right. It was Boston. I was 19 years old. I'm not going to get a job in Boston.
Well, hey, you never know. You took the shot.
I took the shot a couple times there.
Took the shot. So Mike
listened to the
in front of me, which again killed me, but he liked it.
Yeah.
And said, okay, well, I'm going to take you in to meet Todd Pettengill at the time.
Sure.
And everybody, of course, knew Todd in the morning show, and so I went in there, and he asked me several questions, which was, I liked his approach. He was asking me what I knew about the station. He wanted my take on the station. And I thought that was interesting. I realized that he wanted to know what I thought of the station.
Yeah, interesting.
Now, of course, obviously, I, didn't say anything negative.
Well, no, you're not going to do that.
It's the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Exactly, yeah. Plus, now it's a little bit more still in line with the music that you like.
It was.
Yeah.
It was.
Pop rock.
Very much, yeah. And so we got along really well, and he hired me on the spot.
Yeah, cool.
To do weekend overnights.
Okay.
And I said, sure. I mean, let's do it. And so I had to go tell John that I was leaving, which was hard.
Jumping ship, yeah.
And I went over to Fly 92, and Jumpin' Jaime Roberts was born, because up to that point I had used my real name.
Had you really?
I had.
That was something I was going to bring up, that you're not really Jaime Roberts, and you're one of the few like me that the name is completely different on the, well, not completely, I guess, my air name being Chris Warren and my real name being Warren, but my first name.
Yes.
And I know when somebody calls me Chris that I know them through the business.
Right.
Obviously.
Right. Yeah.
And the same thing. But of course, and you've always been Jamie to me. But I'm pretty sure your wife doesn't call you Jamie.
No, she does not.
Okay.
No, she does not. No, my real first name is Ann. So, and
which is a perfectly fine name.
my last name not so perfectly fine.
okay.
At least by back then stand. I mean, we're going back 30 years.
Years,
you
right.
know?
Yeah.
My last name is ethnic. It's Pascarell, so it's a very
Okay.
ethnic name.
True.
And so people thought that, although John Knott never thought it was fine for me to use it, but when I moved over to Fly, no, that's way too hard for people to remember. It's got to, brush off the tongue.
Right.
So Todd gave me the weekend to come up with a name.
Okay.
I interviewed with him, I think, on a Thursday or Friday, and he said, by Monday, tell me what your name is going to be, and if you don't have a name I like, I'm giving you a name.
There you go. Yeah.
So, again, I went back to my friends at the new school and said, what the heck am I looking for? And they said, you just need something that's simple. That's all. Something simple. Think of the names of other people in your family.
Yeah.
So I did. I have had two brothers, James and Robert. So there we go.
You put them together. How about that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So there you go. And that's it for 30 some odd years later.
Yeah. Well, see, if you had started 20 years earlier, they would have just said, well, we have a jingle already, and this is what your name's going to be. Yeah, that's what happened to me.
You serious?
Oh no, much to my grandmother's chagrin. She said, well, why aren't you, Warren Garling on the radio? I said, because they had this jingle, and so I'm Jesse James, whether I like it or not. Yeah. So it was. It's a long, strange story. We all had young American names. That was the theme to the station back then. Yeah. But when I finally got a chance to use the one that my girlfriend in high school and I chose, I was that was it. I did that in college, and then pretty much kept it from then on. Although when I worked at GNA, I was Warren Garling, news director, but on Saturday nights from 6 to midnight, I was Chris Warren, a DJ. Yeah.
Are you kidding?
I had one lady used to call me the Warren twins.
I like her.
Yeah, she was very smart. Yeah, and so but that's the business. You can get away with so many strange
Bizarro
and wonderful things.
Yes.
Because it's theater of the mind. It's whatever you want to make it.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that even people I went to high school with, who of course knew me as Annie,
sure,
will call me Jamie now.
Isn't that crazy?
Wow. I know.
Yeah,
I know. It's very bizarre, but there's a handful of people that call me Ann or Annie, but most people in my life call me Jamie. So, which is fine. I like both of the names equally well.
Oh, sure, sure.
It's all good. So so I worked at Fly, and I did weekend overnights for about, I want to say like 4 or 5 months, and Todd hired me full time to do middays.
There you go.
Which was great, and really a pressure cooker.
Yes.
It really was, and I don't think I was quite ready.
Well, now you're being rated. They're watching the ratings, and you've got real competition. There are actual people that are awake listening to you, not falling asleep.
Right.
Hopefully.
Right. Yeah.
So that's very different. And you're also there. This is what always. Actually, this is the part that I didn't miss when radio changed over the last 20 or so years, is that you were involved in station politics all of a sudden, because you're there when everybody else is working.
It's true.
So the production guy walks in and says, I can't get this person to do this and that.
Right.
And all of a sudden you've got, you got people leaning on you to do things that, I don't want to hear this.
Right. I just want to do my show.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just want to do my show.
Yeah.
So I did middays. I was high pressure. I love Todd because Todd taught me a lot. And I'm grateful for him for hiring me at Fly, but he was not the easiest man at the time to work for.
Okay. Yeah.
He wasn't crazy talented.
Yeah.
Crazy talented. But just not and he would admit this, that he was not the easiest guy to work for. He was very young at the time too, my God.
Still learning himself.
Yeah. So that was hard. So I did middays for about 6 months, and, I wasn't comfortable. I don't think he was comfortable with what I was doing. And so after about 6 months, I moved to full-time overnights.
Okay.
Which, I really enjoyed. People don't get how much I really enjoyed. I did it for 7 years.
Wow. See, now, so that to a lot of people is a demotion.
Yeah.
You've gone from high profile midday
Right.
to, overnights where you don't have as large an audience.
Right. And I didn't feel that way.
Good for you.
I wanted to do the job. If they told me I had to sit in a box in the corner and talk to 25 people, I would have sat in a box in the corner and talked to 25 people. I just wanted to do the job.
Yeah, yeah.
You end up, no matter what shift you're working, you end up having loyal listeners. You end up having, people who are calling in. And the thing about working at Fly, it was so high profile. We were doing giveaways overnight. So it wasn't like it was a dead time slot.
Well, that's cool. Yeah.
Although what killed me is one time, many years later, a kid walked in who had been hired part-time and said, I remember when I was 11 winning from you at around 2 in the morning.
Oh.
That was a little painful. But yeah, so I really enjoyed doing the overnights. I did. I had fun. There was none of the station politics. I would come in. I would do my production for the day, whatever it happened to be, and go on the air and do my show. And by 6:15, I was on my way home,
Now, it does wreak a little havoc with personal life, when you're working a shift like that. You really, if you go out with somebody, you really can't stay out very late because you have to go to work. And of course, getting part of your daytime is, if you're getting 8 hours sleep, your day doesn't start till after lunchtime. And so there's some negatives too, but did you find that easy to get through?
I did. It was, I would say the first 6 months were really tough, trying to train your body to sleep during the day. But once I got used to it, after about 6 months, I enjoyed it. I mean, if we had a nice sunny day, I would choose to, sleep 4 hours, wake up, enjoy the sunshine, then go back to sleep for another 3 or 4 hours.
There you go. Sure.
For the most part, even on the weekend, I would, be up overnight and kind of sleep part of the day. This is when all the stores were open all night long. Walmart would be open and Target would be open, and all the grocery stores were open. So it was great. I was doing my grocery shopping at 3 a.m. Nobody was around. It was, really nice. I had all of my friends worked in radio, so they were up all the hours of the night on the weekend. So we would have all kinds of fun. So yeah, it didn't bother me on a personal level, but once I was doing it, when we got into like the 5th, 6th, 7th year of doing it, it did start to affect my health. Oh. Because your body, and I never bought this, but your body does in fact need sunshine.
Yeah, that's true.
Does need sunshine. So yeah, I started having some, not major medical problems, but enough of a medical issue where, I thought, I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. But you know what? I went to my program director at the time, Mike Morgan was his name. And I said, I love what I do and I want to keep doing it. But, physically, I'm just not going to be able to do this. So I'm just being respectful of you and letting you know that I'm going to try and look elsewhere for another job if you can't help me out. Well, it just so happens we were putting a country station on the air at that time in the cluster, which was, all the stations owned by Jim Morrell. And we were putting on Power Country, 96.7, which was going back to the call letters I had when I, the 96.7 back when I first started. They had acquired those calls and. So he said, do you want to do middays at a country station? And I said, sure. I'm not averse to working in any format.
Were you familiar at all with the country music?
Nothing.
Oh no.
I thought, in fact, I would joke with a friend of mine, Sean, who loved country music. I would say to him, I don't understand what you're listening to. I don't get it. It makes no sense to me. But I found out I was getting the job. I did sorry, I just hit the microphone. I did a deep dive into, I bought all these country magazines.
There you go.
Did all this stuff, went online, read as much as I could. And, of course, the internet was young. So,
What year do you think we're talking now? We're in the late 90s?
Now we're about 97, probably.
Okay.
Anyway, so I learned as much as I could. And, I would check my log the day before to see what artists I was going to be playing and learned about all of the artists. And, did my research and... as what happens at every station you work at, I ended up liking a lot of the country artists. And,
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah.
Even when I worked at the heavy metal station, I ended up liking a lot of the heavy metal music I never thought I would like.
There you go. Yeah.
So yeah, I had fun. I did middays there for a while. Then I bumped up to mornings, and did mornings there for a while.
Now, were you solo in the mornings, or did you have a little?
In the morning.
Okay,
I was solo in the morning. We had a newswoman,
so
Kristen.
Back
a little
and
bit
forth
of banter
there.
back and forth there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I very much enjoyed it. It was fun. We had some great gigs, doing country line dancing and stuff. And, I should say Kevin Richards.
Oh, gosh.
Who is such a good man.
Yes.
Kevin worked for the, competition, if you will. I'm not a big fan of saying competition, but he worked for WGNA, which really wasn't competition. We were a 6,000 watt station. They're the 50,000 watt monster.
Yeah.
But he was so kind because I was going to have to host these country line dancing nights. I didn't know anything about country line dancing, but every week he would teach a country line dancing class. Yeah. And we had a mutual friend, and my mutual friend Sean went to him and said, Jamie doesn't know any. Bring her up. I'm going to teach her the basics, so at least she'll be able to get through it. And he did. Yeah. Just a sweet, sweet man. Mm-hmm. So
excellent.
Good guy.
I've never had the pleasure, but we're. I want to say we may be friends on Facebook, or he belongs to a couple same groups I do on Facebook. So see that now and again. But that's somebody. It dawns on me that I should probably. Talk to.
Yeah. He's a good man. He's crazy talented. Again.
Yeah. And he's been doing this for a while.
A long time.
Yeah.
Long time. He would, I'm not a big believer in any of that. When I worked at Fly, we would have the radio wars between us and Electric 99, what is now the River, of course, but was Electric, and they would battle it out, and they hated us, and we were supposed to hate them. And I was like, this is insane.
Yeah.
Any minute, any second, any one of us could lose our job, and we're going to knock on the door of the guy across the street.
You got to listen to Mike Patrick's interview with me from a couple months ago, because he talks about taunting on Balltown Road, going over and taunting through the window of the competition.
True.
Yeah. You guys were nuts.
It was because it was me and Shadow Michaels and Mike Patrick and Todd Pettengill and John Schaefer and Magic Matt Allen and Jim Chandler, who is now in Nashville. And that was like you were, and I would just go, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to compete with them. I want to do better than them.
Professionally on the air.
Yeah. But when I see somebody in person, that's just ridiculous. So I was never a big believer in that. And it was nice to see that Kevin was not,
exactly.
About that too, when I was doing the country.
That's nice. Yeah.
So I did that. I did country for a year. And then the powers that be at Pamela Broadcasting, Albany Broadcasting at the time, decided that they wanted to switch the station from country to rap and R&B.
Okay.
That's a heck of a flip.
Yeah.
We were running Yankee games at the time on Power Country, which is probably why the station did not succeed. Was it a sports station? Was it a country station?
Exactly. Worked for a few of those in my time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Although I got some great perks for running Yankee games, like going to the stadium and having wonderful, beautiful seats and all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah.
But so they decided to change it to what is now Jams 96.3. And I helped them change it. I entered all the songs in. I helped them do all the logs, put everything together, knowing that it was going to change. Yeah, it taught me a lot. Listen, the one thing about me and radio, I just loved to learn. I just wanted to, it didn't matter if it was my job or not. I just liked learning.
Yes.
Everything I could get into my head, I wanted. So I helped them do all that, and as I said, loading in all the songs and figuring out what was going to go in the liners and the jingles, etc.
Now, was there a guarantee that you were going to transition and stay with them and do that format, or?
Well, no. What was going to happen was I was going to help them get it on the air.
Okay.
And help them keep it running for the first couple of weeks.
Gotcha.
And then I was going to do talk. on our sister station, WROW.
Okay, interesting. Okay. I knew ROW came in here somewhere.
Yep.
And this is where it was. Okay.
Paul Vandenberg was running the station at the time. And I used to, when I was working the overnights on Fly, when I would get off the air, I would go over and sit in with him for like 15 or 20 minutes doing, bantering with him on his morning show.
Yeah.
He liked what he heard and offered me a job doing afternoons,
Wow.
afternoon talk.
Whoa.
I had always wanted to do talk.
Interesting.
Always wanted to do talk.
Wow. See, that's something that never attracted me at all.
Really?
I'm so in love with music that I could never imagine doing a talk format. And I did it. I subbed for Joe Gallagher a few times on WGY back in the 2000s. Yeah, the first decade anyway. I did not find it all that entertaining for me.
Really?
Hopefully the audience found it more entertaining.
I'm sure
and
they did.
I do enjoy interviewing people, which is if that's all I'm going to do, that's fine. But
Right.
But the banter back and forth with listeners, I'm fine doing it off the air on the phone, and
Okay.
I've made a lot of friends that way over the years. But doing it on the air just never appealed to me.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
interesting. But this was just a progression for you. You just figured this is cool.
Yeah, and so I helped them get jams on the air, which was what was really funny is we had set up an answering machine so that listeners could call in when we switched from country to jams.
Oh,
I wish I had kept some of those messages because, my firstborn they wanted to kill, but whatever. So yeah, that was interesting. But so then, I transitioned from country to do talk. I started out doing a talk show on WROW from 3 to 6. We were called the Bitchin' Babes.
okay.
Not my choice.
No.
The Bitchin' Babes. It was me and a woman named Betsy Kapner who had never done radio before.
Interesting.
She worked in sales in radio.
Okay, so she knew the business a bit.
A bit. So we were, it was kind of the show where we would pick whatever issue of the day or news story of the day and kind of, one would pick one side and the other would pick another side.
Oh, okay.
And, as you said, it's all theater of the mind, sometimes, when I'm doing music radio, I believe everything that I'm saying because I love the music, but sometimes in talk, you're playing a bit of a role.
Yeah.
Which I say that to all of the people who listen to talk know that the people who are on the air are sometimes playing a role.
Exactly.
Rush Limbaugh didn't believe everything that came out of his mouth, just
true.
so you know.
It's true.
So I would be happy, we would sit down for our meeting with our producer. We would decide what topics we were going to talk about. And I would say, well, you can pick whatever side you want to go on. And, because I wanted to make her comfortable. She was new to all of this.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah. Good
and don't
for
get
you.
me wrong, I was very nervous because I had never done talk before.
Yeah.
Very nervous. But at least I knew radio, and she didn't know that. So I wanted to make her comfortable. So we did, we did the show. And as the show went on, she got angrier and angrier with me because she thought I was constantly fighting with her. And I would say, we're just, this is the show. It's just a show.
Right,
This
exactly.
is entertainment. What
Exactly,
we're doing.
yeah.
But she, couldn't get it. And long story short, a year into our tenure, we were doing a show together. We went to a commercial break. She got up out of her chair. I assumed to go to the ladies' room.
Oh, no.
Got up, got out of her chair, got her stuff, walked out of the building, and never came
Never
back.
came back. Wow. No. How much time did you have left in the show?
About an hour.
Oh, jeez, Jamie.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Nothing like live radio.
Oh, nothing
man.
like it.
No.
Nothing like it. So, anyway, so the show continued. I finished out the show, and then I got another partner whose name was Joe.
Okay.
Joe LaRossi was his name. And it was the Jamie and Joe show.
Okay.
And, same kind of format. You
Oh,
know,
that's cool. Yeah, just didn't call the Bitchin' Babes anymore.
which I was very happy about. I think I still have a shirt that says "Bitchin' Babes." on
All
it
right,
somewhere.
cool,
Yeah,
cool.
I mean, like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot. I was actually going to put on my WTRY shirt that I have left from my days working with you, and I forgot all about it.
Oh, look at that.
But do you like the one I got?
I do like the one you have.
Yeah,
I would like a shirt like that. I got to find out where you got that.
That
That's
actually
nice.
came
With
from
the VU
online
meter.
somewhere. Yeah, it's a volume unit meter, as we call it, the VU meter in the business. And they don't really make the VU meters like that anymore. They're all digital.
Yeah.
But no, I found this online, so you'll find it somewhere.
I'll definitely look for it because that's nice. I like it.
Comes in multiple colors.
Oh, well, I like the blue. The blue is lovely. It looks lovely on you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyway, so then,
Joe and Jamie, Jamie and Joe. Okay, I figured you should have had top billing.
Thank
okay,
you. I
Jamie and Joe.
That.
Good.
I had Jamie and Joe, and we did it for a year.
Wow.
And then Paul decided to go. Well, the truth is that Paul was also in the process of trying to buy his station and do all that. So, he just kind of decided he didn't want to have to worry about that afternoon show anymore. So, kind of decided to end the show, which was fine. And so stopped doing that. I was helping B95, which was another station in our cluster,
right,
with some of the stuff that they needed done with their logs and stuff. There were some computer programs at the time that me and one other person in the building were the only two people who knew how to do it. And I only knew because I decided I just wanted to learn.
Sure.
So I was staying and helping B95 with that when I got a call from Dennis Lammy, who was the head of the what was then the Clear Channel cluster.
Exactly.
In town.
Yep. They had come in and bought out a bunch of stations. It was a interesting combination, which eventually sorted itself out. At the time, the FCC rules were you couldn't have more than a certain amount of audience or share or something, and at one point they had two of the biggest stations in the market and they weren't allowed to. But anyway, it settled down, and he brought you over for who?
For TRY.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So at the time, Rick Mitchell was doing mornings. They were looking for a partner for Rick. So I came over, Rick and I did a practice show just to make sure everybody was happy with what they heard. They were. Said goodbye to Albany Broadcasting on good terms, all fine.
Good.
And, started working with Rick on TRY. We did the morning show together for about a year and a half. And then Rick was let go. And then John Gabriel and I did the show together.
Just had lunch with John a couple days ago.
Good man.
He sends his best.
Good man. He's such a good man.
Absolutely,
and Gabe and I did the show together. Gosh, I want to say maybe 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Absolutely.
It was a long time.
Yeah. Well, that's right. I came over there after having been at the river for about 7 or 8 years. When Clear Channel came in, they said, okay, we don't need part-timers on the weekends anymore. We're going to voice track the weekends with our full-timers.
Right.
So I'm out of a job from the river.
Right.
And for a few months, actually went over to Albany Broadcasting and learned the board at B95.
Okay.
And thought that I was going to do some swing work and vacation work for them at least.
Okay.
Because I was doing all part-time at the time. I had a full-time job. So I get the training that I needed for B95, and then about a month goes by without a shift. They hadn't started me yet, and Randy McCartan calls me, and he says had been my boss at the river. He said, "Now I'm in charge of TRY. Would you like to come back to Clear Channel and work at TRY?" So
great.
that's when we started working together. You're talking probably about 2002. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I went over there in 2000. So,
So it's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, which was great. It was great to have you there. It was great you were fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, no, really. You're incredibly talented, A. It was also nice to have someone who could actually fill in if you wanted to take a break,
And I really enjoyed that stuff, being able to fill in for you. Right up, actually, to after I was actually unceremoniously let go back in early 2020. because this past January, you were all set to do the big WGY anniversary show,
Correct.
the live play that we were going to do on, and you had to back out due to health reasons and family reasons.
Yeah.
And I've subbed for you one more time.
And I am eternally grateful.
Well, I'm grateful to you because it was probably my swan song on commercial radio as far as I don't expect to go back to it. But to get that one last chance to do something I always wanted to do was to be in a radio play. So you were in my prayers for days. I'm saying, oh my God, I hope everything's fine with Jamie and her mom and everything, but this is fantastic opportunity for me to go out, doing something that I'd always wanted to do,
I'm
a radio play.
Can I tell you, that makes what was a really tough situation for my family, but that puts a little sunshine on it.
Well,
so I'm happy to hear that.
I'm happy to let you know that.
Really happy to hear that. That's No, I am. That means a lot. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So what was it like? You've had some morning partners now. How did Rick fit into this for your time you were working with him?
I had known Rick from my time at K-Light, because Rick was doing mornings at K-Light when I was over there.
Yeah.
And we always got along fine, not a problem. Doing mornings with him was just a bit different. When you do mornings or with someone or your partner up on any kind of show, and I'm sure it's just like this in an office, you learn things about each other that usually only a husband or a wife would
That's
know,
true. Yes.
know?
Yep.
Your work husband, your work wife,
exactly.
if you will.
Exactly.
And so we certainly learned a lot about each other. You know what? Rick is a very talented guy. I grew up listening to Rick on the radio.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I think of if someone had to say to me, what made you think that you would want to get into radio? Waking up and listening to Rick.
There you go.
Back in the day when I was in school, it meant everything,
Yep.
Fred Peabody and all of his cast of characters and everything.
Well, there's John Knott again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, loved it. And Rick is really talented. Rick just wasn't a guy who appreciated what was in front of him. That's all.
Okay. Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. It happens. Sure.
I think sometimes when, radio in the 70s, when he was doing a morning show, was when the DJs were the gods.
Yeah, a lot changed over the 20 years from then. Yeah.
A lot has changed.
Yeah. And the 20 years since then, since 2002, yeah.
And so I just think that was a hard thing for him to get, that's not what it was anymore.
Yep.
And I would feel badly for him because I try to be. Listen, I am by no far a perfect human being, but I try to be a person who appreciates what I have right now.
Yes.
Because I may have had $1 million, 5 years ago, but do I have enough money to eat today? Then it's a good day,
Exactly.
So that's, kind of the person I try to be. And unfortunately, I don't think Rick could get there.
Oh, too bad.
And so that made it difficult. He wasn't very happy. He just wasn't very happy. So there were some things that happened over the course of the time. None that had to do with me, but Rick had some trouble with management, and ultimately he was let go about a year and a half, year and 8 months into our tenure together.
So did you and John click immediately, or was that also okay?
No, John and I had we were great.
Yeah,
John,
and he was already at the station.
He was doing afternoons.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we had known each other. We were friends.
Sure.
And and so. Before Rick was let go, they had called me in and said, it's going to be you and John. Are you cool with that? Absolutely. Let's do it. And we did. And at that point, we were working at the bunker. God rest it. We were at the bunker.
For the uninitiated, the bunker is the WTRY and at one time WPYX, PIX 106. Studios, and it was the TRI transmitter site.
Yes.
And the WTRY road is still there, leading to it. It's off of Route 7 in Niskayuna, the Latham, Niskayuna. And and it really, when you pulled up outside, it's just this big block building, and it became known as the bunker.
The bunker.
Yeah.
And you would do your work there with the spiders and the snakes and the mice.
Yeah,
And have
exactly.
a wonderful time, and learn not to fear any of
Yeah,
them.
right. It's down along the Mohawk, so it was in a swampy area, so you had all that stuff that went with it.
Yeah, and Gabe and I had a pact that I didn't mind snakes, so I would take care of the snakes in the building, but I hated spiders, so he would take care of the spiders. So.
That's a panic. That's a panic.
Yeah, so no, Gabe and I were great. You know, we worked at the bunker, then we moved into our new, I hit the microphone again, sorry. I'm Italian, I talk with my hands.
Yes, me too.
And then we moved to where we are now at 1203 Troy Schenectady Road. And we were great. I mean, I loved working with Gabe.
Yeah,
I did. Yeah. You know, we're not working together by no fault of my own and by no hand of my own. You know?
Yeah.
We had, we went from Clear Channel to iHeartMedia, and iHeartMedia decided to let go a lot of people across the country. A lot of people decided to let people go, and unfortunately, Gabe was one of those people.
And that was only the start of many such purges, we can sit and talk what the business is, now compared to what it was. But everything changes. Yeah. I mean, when you stop and think about it, what did the blacksmith do after the horseless carriage came along, Right. And so now radio is just not anywhere near what it was when we started out, especially when I started out. And again, radio DJs were gods. You got them on the phone and you go, oh my God, I'm talking to this person. And unfortunately, it's just not that way with the corporate structure the way it is right now. Right. And the fact that, how live are you when you're on the air at the moment?
I'm live from 6 to about 9:15.
Okay. Yeah. So and that's more than actual some morning shows are these days, but it's mostly just the morning shows that are live.
Yeah,
Yeah, the rest of the day, not so.
I want to make sure I'm not lying. That's true on all of our stations. Yeah,
locally,
morning shows are the only thing that are live.
Yeah,
that's true.
So that really changed it for a lot of us. And I had never done the only live that I did on the 18 years that I was at WTRY the second time around, in the from 2002 to 2020. The only live radio I ever did was when I was either occasionally at a remote location, which we did a little bit, but not very much. Most of that was just in-person stuff.
Okay.
But I would go down the hall and sit for a little while on Saturday mornings with Joe Gallagher, and I'd be live on GY for 10, 15 minutes, just going back and forth and making each other laugh and hopefully keeping the audience laughing.
Sure.
So the last 18 years of my life, it was all what we call voice tracking, and it was all, but it presented a new challenge, as I'm sure it does for you, to be able to sound live when you're not.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It does.
Very
it
important.
does. And, it's like you said about everything changing. It's, I am the first person to admit that I am resistant to change. But because I love radio I still, 34 years later, love what I get to do in that room. And so if it means that I have to change something to still be able to get to do what I do in that room,
there you go.
Then I'll do it. Even if I don't agree with the change, I don't like the change. If I'm still enjoying what I get to do in those four walls, then I will go ahead. I'll stick the needles in my eyes if I have to.
Yeah. And I just remembered when you said that, the other thing I thought about before you got here that you were unique with, and that is you are the youngest person I've spoken to so far.
Wow.
Yeah. Because almost everybody I've talked to is either no longer in the business, they've retired.
Okay.
Or if they're still in the business, they've been in it for 40 plus years, and you're in you're in your 34th. So you're the youngest person I've talked to so far.
Wow, I haven't been the youngest at anything in a long time, so I'll take it.
That's why I invited you. I wanted to make you feel good.
Well, you did. Yeah. I'll take that anytime. Yeah.
So what's the average day like for you these days compared to, again, back when you're still getting up early, obviously, because you're live, for those hours. So that part hasn't changed. But what happens, as the day goes on?
Well, now, and let me go back if I can, if you
Please.
don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
To pandemic. during pandemic, we had the option, and a lot of people took the option to work from home. It wouldn't be live for obvious reasons, but you could, for all intents and purposes, get a computer and a microphone and some headphones, and you can record your show.
Yeah, just like I did to get this podcast.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
That's all you need. There you go. That's all you need. And, I know quite a few people in the area, not just at our stations, but at other stations in the area that did that, chose to do that.
Yep.
I couldn't do it. I didn't do it. I worked every single day I went into the office. For me, and this goes back, I need the vibe. I need to feel, I like that drive into work when it's dark and I know the sun is going to rise, because for me, I want to feel what the listeners are feeling, because if I'm sitting in my closet, with my headphones on and a microphone, it takes me out of what I'm really doing.
Yeah.
It takes me out of the time of day. It takes me out of who I'm talking to. And, going all the way back to the new school when, Tommy Hahn and Charlie Mertz and Dick Stark, God love him, told me, remember, you're talking to your best friend.
There you go.
Yep. That has stuck with me for 34 years. And if I was sitting in my closet, all I would be thinking is I would never be talking with my friend sitting in a closet. So, yeah, I went into work every single day. It's because I love that feeling. I love that feeling. And ultimately, if it came down to I had to work from home, I don't know that would have the same
Interesting.
appeal to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. So you get in there at 5:30, going on 6 o'clock in the morning, a little earlier.
A little earlier than that.
Okay.
I get in around 5.
Okay. Cool.
What I do is I'll wake up at 3:30. I'll sit up in bed with my iPad and go through all my entertainment sites and go through the news and see everything that's happened. So you'd be surprised the amount of news and stuff that can happen while you're sleeping when you go to bed at 7:30 at night.
Sure.
So I do all of that and, prep some stuff and go into work and just write out some stuff of things I want to do. Now, every day on my show, I do something called the Social Dilemma, which has been the most popular part of the show for a few years now, thankfully. So I have to make sure that's all set and all good to go, because the job isn't just on the air anymore. You have to write blogs now.
Yes, you do. And you have to be on social media.
You have to be on social media, and you have to make sure all of that is up and running. And so some of that gets done before I get on the air. Some of it gets done after I get off the air. But so doing all that, and then I start live at 6 o'clock and roll from there. And like I said, I'm live till about 9:15. I'll voice track that last 45 minutes because it's really only a couple of breaks because we're in a music sweep.
And you're working down the hall from a gentleman that you worked with at Fly 92 many years ago, Mike
He's
Patrick.
my news guy.
Yeah.
He's the TROI news guy among the GY news guy and the River news guy.
And throughout New England news guy.
There you go,
Yeah.
all that. Yeah, I always thought it was crazy interesting that Mike helped me get my job at Fly, one of my first jobs.
Yeah.
And then it was flipped around when he was coming to interview for GY, and I'll never forget him sitting in the lobby and my seeing him. And I said, "What are you doing here? It's so great to see you." And he said, "I'm applying for GY. Can you put in a good word?"
There you go.
And I was like, "Yeah, of course."
Certainly,
and I did. And I love when life spins around a little bit. That's all.
It's interesting. I learned it very early on because the first person that hired me at WSNY, Don DeRosa, who had come from WPTR, and then he came over as the program director at SNY and started at rock and roll. Before that, it had been beautiful music, easy listening type music. He, about 2.5 years after I left there, shows up at the radio station in Saratoga where I'm working, looking for work. And I'm thinking, well, this is interesting because here I am, 20 years old or so, and he's got quite a few years on me. And here he was a program director at a, in the market, and now here he is outside the market,
Sure.
looking at a small station to see if he can find a job, which there wasn't anything available at the time. So all it was, hey, Don, great to see you. And,
Right.
go in for your interview, let me know what happens. And that's the last I saw of him, And it had happened one other time where I was working outside the business, and somebody I'd worked with in the business came looking for work and knocked on the door at the recording studio that I was working at the time. And once again, this guy was at the top of his game just a few years ago, and now here he is knocking on doors. So it is a crazy business in that respect.
It is.
You must feel, here you've been with the same company now for going on 20
years.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
22 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen often anymore.
It really doesn't. Listen, never once, and it sounds cliche, but listen, I am blessed and I know it. I really, and again, this is how I feel. I worked for the state. I worked for those alcohols. God knew those were not the places I belonged.
There you go. Yep.
That I needed to find my people.
Yeah.
And I walked into that new school and I knew these are my people.
Sure.
And that was it. Listen, radio people are our own ilk, as it is everywhere.
Sure.
Computer programmers are their own ilk. Teachers are their own ilk.
Mm-hmm.
Radio people are, and these are my people.
Now, not to slight anybody and not to say that they aren't fun to be around, but you do have a separate life outside of radio, which I didn't learn to do for a while. And it actually cost me my first marriage, to be honest with you, because that's how dedicated to the business I was and wasn't paying attention to my personal life.
Yeah.
And my personal life consisted of my work friends joining me on the weekends and partying and doing stuff like that.
Right.
And so it all fell apart because of that.
Yeah.
My very smart wife now of 44 years pointed out to me that she went to one radio party, early on in our we weren't even married yet. Maybe, I don't know. I think we were still going out together. And she said, this isn't the crowd for me. I'm not comfortable. I know you like these people. I know they're probably fine people, but I really, and so that's part of why we lasted the 44 years, of course I still see these people, and a lot of times on my own, and she still, sees them obviously when they're coming here for the interview. She gets to catch up, and we enjoyed having you and your lovely wife here a couple of years ago, for an evening. So, we have those relationships, but it was a completely, once I left the radio station, it was time to concentrate on the family.
Yeah. And, when I was younger and new to the business, I was not unlike you. It was all radio all the time, even on my off time. But when I was in my early 30s, my dad passed away suddenly. He wasn't ill, nothing. Ultimately, he had an aneurysm. I only tell the story because we didn't know he was going to pass.
Sure.
But he did. He passed suddenly, and it taught me just a really important lesson that we all say we know, which is, it could end at any moment, life is short, enjoy it, blah, 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 all those cliches. But in that moment, when that happened, I knew, all that stuff is really true.
Yeah.
So make the best of what you have.
True.
And, and I love radio, and I, will do it until either I choose it's not time or they say, here's the door. Thank you for your service.
Yep.
But I also knew then that it can't be the only thing.
Yes.
It can't be the only thing.
Yes.
That's all.
Well, that's what my wife taught me. Yeah.
And I'm lucky enough to be married to someone who is not at all enamored by radio. In fact, could care less about it.
Right.
She cares about my job. She cares about my friends who I have introduced her to. But in terms of you're on the radio, isn't that cool? Can we get concert tickets? Can we? She could care.
My wife was never impressed with any of that stuff.
No, which is why I always say she is the perfect one for me.
There you go.
The last thing I would need is someone feeding my ego. So,
Exactly. No, she's always kept me grounded, and that's helped. And she's the one that said to me, when I was fired I worked for 17 years without getting fired in the business. So when I got fired, And she said to me, I know you could get another radio job, but maybe there's something else out there that you would enjoy doing. I just didn't know what I'd been educated for at that point.
Sure.
And it turns out sales and marketing were in my blood, because that's what you do when you're on the radio, pretty much. I just turned it into a completely different industry and went that direction for the rest of my life. Of course, having to get back into radio part-time, because I was 11 when I walked into a radio station and said, this is what I want to do. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I left there and said, I can't wait to go back in there again. And I did a few weeks later. And so 11 years old, and I just had that.
You knew.
I knew. And by the time I was 16, I was doing it.
God bless.
So,
That's amazing.
But it gets in your blood, and it's always going to be there, which is why I enjoy the back and forth that I do here. Even if it's just once a month, it's fun being on the microphone. It's fun, talking to folks. I
love it. Yeah,
and
this
finding,
is great.
Like minds and different paths. And that's what I like about yours. It was, a little later than mine. You started like 18, 19 years after I did.
Wow.
So you've seen the change a little earlier in your career, because I'm hoping that you have another good 20 years left in you.
Bite your tongue. I don't hope that. Well, I'll take 5. How's that?
But there are a lot of folks out there that just never, want to say goodbye. And if they're talented enough, they really don't have to.
That's true.
There are some many plus 70, radio folks out there that are doing just fine in their markets, and they're.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I do know about me. When and if I do retire, when I retire, God willing, when I retire. I would not be able to do that until I had a specific plan for what I was going to be doing with my time.
Not a bad idea. Yeah.
Because I like having a purpose.
Sure.
I like waking up and having a purpose. And sometimes even on the weekend, I'm like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I,
See, now that's where we differ.
Yeah, you're a free man now.
Yeah, and I retired from full-time work about 4 years ago, and I'm just enjoying every second of it. You saw the patio and the garden outside where I spend a lot of my time in the summertime, obviously. And I that's fine. If I wake up with not a lot to do now, I do like to have something on the horizon to look forward to. We do a weekly breakfast with the retired guys in the neighborhood, which is cool, and that keeps looking forward to. And these monthly chats that I have with old friends, and then every couple of months we got to get you back to these lunches. Every couple of months we get together with a bunch of I call it the old dead radio guys lunch.
Dead guys and girls.
And girls. Oh, yeah. And there are a few, I'm happy to say. And you've made a couple of them over the years. But so we never really got to what happens. I mean, you're done on the air, but, they don't hear your voice after 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. But you're still there for a few more hours.
Still there for a few more hours, prepping some of what's going to happen for the next day's show. Doing production, obviously.
Commercials and such.
Commercials and things like that, promotions. Right. But there's a whole lot, now because a lot of our stuff is voice tracked and it comes from other markets, that the air personalities you hear don't necessarily live in Albany. So you're constantly in contact with them, sending them information about what's going on in the area so they know what to talk about. You don't want them talking about Cleveland, Ohio when they're on the air here. So that's all part of it, I'll be there until, depending on the day, noontime, 1 o'clock at the latest, probably.
There you go. Yeah.
And then I'll head home, and depending on what my responsibilities are for the day, give myself a few hours of whatever happens to be. There was a time when I first started working at then Clear Channel, now iHeart. I was not only doing the morning show on TRY, but I was also doing a talk show on GY.
I remember that, yeah.
So I did talk on GY part-time probably for 6 years or so.
Wow, that long.
Yeah,
wow.
Because for a while, I did a news show. I would do a 2-hour news show on Sunday. And then I didn't want to do that anymore because the news got crazy. And then I did a pet talk show for 2 years. Or
there you go.
Years.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And then I would fill in. That was back when Al Roney was doing middays there. So I would do my morning show on TRY, wrap it up, and literally run down the hall so that I could get on GY and do talk there from 10 to 1.
Isn't that crazy?
I know.
Yeah, yeah.
I know. But you know what? The thing I always felt about talk, I always felt like talk was the true challenge of if I could really think on my feet, you know?
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Especially now that everything's voice tracked, you don't have to be as quick with the tongue and as fast on your feet. But back in the day when we were doing live, spinning the records ourselves and all that stuff. It was a very different challenge than what it is today.
It was.
So talk being live and being the fact that you have no idea what the next person is going to say or do, you really have to be nimble. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and some days you fly and some days you fall.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But I did always love that challenge. I did. I mean, because as you say, when I got into the business, we were spinning records, and you would do all of that, and everything was live. You didn't have an option for it not being live.
That's true. Yeah.
And then you went from that, and then I went to carts, and then you went to CDs, and now everything is a computer. I press a button, and it's done.
Yeah.
I do miss, and I'm sure you do as well, I do miss, the talent that it took to mix the records together perfectly. And I would love doing that and getting it to sound just right.
There was something about finishing a 4 or 5 hour shift and stepping outside the studio and saying, I just did a great job to yourself. You think I didn't play anything at the wrong speed.
Right.
I when I was talking up to the intro on the record, I hit all of them, just perfectly. Perfect. I never talked over any singers, and you'd leave the studio going, that felt good, Yeah. And today it's not quite the same because you are putting, a lot of times you're not live and you're putting things into a computer.
Yeah. I mean, even live, it's, because I am live for those three hours or so, but I'm pressing a button. There is no, I'm not mixing two records together or, making sure everything is flowing perfectly. I'm hitting a button and I'm speaking.
Yeah. Remember the days where we would try, if you only had 3 or 4 voices on your station, you would try not to play 2 commercials in a row with the same voice.
So
and
true.
You had choice over that.
That's true.
And so there was so much that went in to performing, back in the 80s when you started, and obviously earlier than that for me.
Yeah, I loved all that.
It was quite the challenge.
Although I love a lot of the stuff now. I mean, there's so many different computer programs now. Never in my wildest dreams being not at all computer savvy, let me just say.
Okay.
Did I ever think that I would have the knowledge to use all the different programs that we have to use?
There you go.
To do what we do. So, I mean, I do like that. Like I said, I enjoy the learning.
You're still,
I do.
And you're still enjoying what you do, and that's the important part.
I do.
Because if you're not enjoying it, the audience is going to know that pretty quick.
Yeah. They're going to feel it. They're going to hear it. They're going to. No, I do. There are days I wish I didn't. And I'm sure you can understand what I'm saying because I do really love it. I will say, though, that now that I'm a little bit older, but still the youngest person in here, just want to remind everybody, so I'm not that old. There are days now when I can imagine not doing it. And for a long time, I could not. I could not ever imagine not doing it. I thought I would die if I wasn't doing it.
My late mother-in-law always used to say, everything happens for a reason. And when I was let go in early 2020, I said, okay, maybe it's time.
Yeah.
I really was not terribly upset about it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I was only on once a week, and I was only working 2 or 3 hours a week at the station to put together 6 hours and some commercial work, on the station. So it wasn't that a big part of my life was going to be missing, but at the same time, it was the end of over 50 years of being on the radio.
And that's it.
And realizing this could be it. And but it didn't bother me as much as I thought it would. Within a few weeks, I said, I really don't miss it.
Yeah.
And I don't think, even though I had some opportunities to maybe get back into it, decided no. COVID came along and kind of put those on hold.
Right.
And since then, nobody's knocking on the door, and I don't know if I'd answer.
Yeah. Well, I would always knock on the door if I had the power. So there. But yeah, no, I mean, like I said, it's good to know that I won't die.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Well, Jamie, this has been terrific catching up with you, and
Really
and
has.
I know you've had some challenges of late. I know your mom went through COVID, and some other things have happened. In the last few months, and just know that we're thinking about you.
Thank you.
And that we just still enjoy listening to you.
You're very
and
kind.
that you're a real pro, and it's been great working with you over the years. And
It's been my pleasure.
Don't be
I'm
a
honored
stranger.
to call you friend.
Yeah,
I
thank
truly
you
am.
very
I truly
much.
am.
We'll talk again soon.
Thank you.
Radio Split Ranch.
Once again, I have to thank Jamie not only for her love of radio, which is so evident when you listen to her, but for knowing when she needs some time off. Because of her, I got the chance to MC some area concerts and events at places like SPAC, the Empire State Plaza, the Egg. When she'd say to the boss, "I need some time off. Can I ask Chris to sub for me?" Before she left the Radio Split Ranch after our interview, we performed our now traditional call letter count and found that she's made 10 stops along the way, bringing our running count of 11 guests to a total of 120 radio stations. A few weeks ago, I texted one of my oldest and dearest friends to ask him if he would consent to an interview here, only to learn that he was in the last days of his 7-year fight with prostate cancer. So I never got the opportunity to chronicle the life of a man who defined to know him is to love him before the beloved Mark Kaplan was taken from us too soon. Thanks to Mark's longtime boss, Darren Scott Kibbe at WVCR, the Saint at Siena College, I'm able to share the interview Mark did with me a few years ago on his weekly show called Saint's Stories. We talked about the publishing of my first memoir, but the important thing to listen for here is Mark's interview style. It's the true definition of conversational. Miss you, Mark. Always will. Your loss makes it difficult to live up to my traditional show closing. Don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened.
I'm Mark Kaplan, and this is Saint Stories, and I have been personally looking forward to this show for a long, long time. One of my really good friends in life, in radio, anywhere, is my guest. But hang on. We're not going to talk about how he's my friend. We're talking about how he's written a book called I'll Have to Ask My Mom. His name is Warren Garling, and in Truth in Advertising, he is on the radio using the name Chris Warren. Hey, Warren Garling, Chris Warren, what should I call you?
Well, call me Warren, since you have for about 45 years now, I think.
That's right.
We've known each other. Well, you knew me before I knew you, but you didn't know it was me. Should we tell them what that's about?
Yeah, go ahead.
You used to listen to me on the radio when I was actually Jesse James on the old WSNY in Schenectady back in the late 60s. And then I met you, and I said, "Oh my gosh, I used to listen to you on WVCR every afternoon, and you used to make me laugh," and we became, friends from there on in.
But the strange thing is, then we'll get into the book and all kinds of things. This is going to be way too easy an interview. The other strange thing is, your real name is Warren Garling, and I knew you as Warren Garling, and then you were Chris Warren, and I'd be talking to you on the radio, I'd be saying, "Well, Chris this, well, Chris that," then I'd turn off the microphone and say, "Hey, Warren, I don't know how my brain
That's
split
interesting.
it."
Yeah, because I have a lot of people that I've worked for over the years that say, "I'm not going to call you by your real name because I'll accidentally do that on the radio."
Yeah, I was able
to.
Yeah,
well, if you remember back, I worked at one station as the news director as Warren Garling during the week, and then on Saturday nights I was Chris Warren for 6 hours playing music. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, so
okay, so this is interesting because everybody's interested in radio. So the book is called I'll Have to Ask My Mom. It's a radio journey. Why did you write this book?
Because I retired and had nothing better to do, to be very honest with you. Actually, I started. This is really kind of crazy. We got our first computer back in the early 90s, our first home computer, our first PC, and I found that my fingers just flew across the keyboard, and I thought, well, what can I do on here that might be fun to just constantly be on the keyboard? And so I started writing the memoir.
Wow.
About my days in radio. We're talking almost 25 years ago now, so that was a false start. And then about 15 years ago, I started again. I got a new keyboard that was even cooler, and I started it again. And I looked at that about 10 years ago, and I said, well, all the humor in that is now dated. So I started it all over again pretty much last spring when I was on the, it started in my den and then continued on the back patio, and just spent most of last year, writing about the fun I've had getting into radio. That's what most of the book is about, the early days. And then, from there, what I've been up to.
Other than everybody, who do you think should read this book?
Anybody that's ever toyed with getting into radio, and especially the ones that were smart enough to realize you cannot make a living in radio. You have to have a second job. You have to do commercials on the side. I mean, it's never been a high-paying job. You do have, obviously, your success stories, and they go on to make millions. But most of us that toil in radio, including me now part-time, we don't make a whole heck of a lot of money. It's really, I mean, I fell in love with it at 11 and years of age, and that was it. I was hooked, and, I'm still in love with it.
After people read this book, what will they learn is great about radio? Because I know radio is great, you know radio is great, but when they read this book, when they finish it, what will stick out at them?
Well, I would almost have to say the people, okay? I mean, it takes a certain person to be able to, as you know, Mark, get behind the microphone by yourself in a studio and make any sense of it, okay? Whether it's between records or trying to do a talk show or, a sports commentator, whatever. There's something in us that keeps the mouth moving even when we're not sure the brain is supplying it with the correct verbiage. And so what I'm suggesting is that if, again, you ever thought about being on the radio, this is going to tell you why people do it and why people stay in it and why people like me almost 50 years later just would miss it if I didn't have it to do at least once a week, which
Me
is what
too.
I'm doing now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our guest is Warren Garling. He uses the name Chris Warren on the radio. Actually, I'll whisper this. He's on 98.3 these days, but don't tell anybody I told you that. The name of his book is I'll Have to Ask My Mom, and that book is written by Warren Garling. Now, I don't want to give up the whole book or give away the whole book.
Well, I don't either, because certainly if you can spend $9.95 on it, I'd appreciate it.
But is there one thing, one story that you can give out of the book that won't give it all away just to whet somebody's appetite?
Well, yeah. Let me do the story about how I got the name Chris Warren.
Yeah.
Okay, because that's a fun one. I was a junior in high school when I found I was going to be on the radio, but I'd already told my girlfriend, who was a senior in high school, I was a junior at the time. I had been telling her I'm going to be on the radio. I'm going to do it by hook or by crook, and of course the book talks about how it happens. But well before that, she said, "Well, are you going to have an air name? His real name isn't Boom Boom Brannigan." I said, "No, it's not. In the phone book as B Brannigan." And she said, "No, you have to come up with a name." And she says, "And I've been thinking about this." And she said her name was Robin, and she said, "I always liked how Christopher Robin flowed." Okay?
Oh, yeah.
And she liked that character in the book, obviously. And so she said, "What if you were Christopher Warren?" And I said, "Oh, I like that. I really do." So I get all excited because I'm going to be on the radio all of a sudden, and I find out that I don't get to choose my name. The station had a jingle for me already with a different name, and that's what I was going to be. So she doesn't realize that I've gone off to college. We broke up. She went off to college. I went off the following year, and I started using the name in college. And she didn't know about that until many years later. So the book goes into how she found out that I was using it and how we reunited and that sort of thing. But, fun story.
No, it is. It's all interesting. Now, you are a local guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of people, and I mean, that's the way the business is. A lot of people are from somewhere else, but you've lived here your whole life.
Pretty much.
Did it especially mean a lot to you to be on the radio, where you live, where you were born, where you grew up?
Well, I will say now, yes. But back when I was in radio full-time, that really wasn't a big consideration. I mean, I actually went to work for a friend of mine in Tupelo, Mississippi once, and that was about as far away from here as you can get, especially in 1975.
Yeah.
And so when I was in radio full-time, I was ready to go where the pay would be better, the market would be bigger, and I'd have more listeners and that sort of thing. And then I met my second wife, and she mentioned that she was born and raised here and had a twin that lived a few miles away and was probably never going to move. So if I was ever thinking about, changing jobs and going to a new market, that maybe I should give it a second thought if I really loved her. And
Wow.
she and I did, and we're still together 41 years later. So,
What year did you start in radio?
1969.
So how has radio changed since then?
Oh, gosh.
I know. I'll go home and come back 3 hours later.
Well, that's probably what we could do. You know, a lot of folks complain that it's not the challenge that it used to be, because when we first started, you and I, you were actually a disc jockey.
Yeah.
You jockeyed discs between 2 or 3 different turntables, and they had to be in the right order and come on at the right time. And when you ran your own control board, you know, it was an accomplishment when you were done with your hours on the air, and you would sit there and go, that was a nice tight shift, you'd say. You know, everything flowed, everything went well. Or you sat there and said, maybe I should have called in sick this morning. I've had that happen a couple of times too. So what's happened now is, and everybody's familiar with the old mouse click, that's pretty much what we're doing in the radio today. It's all in the computer, and we just, you know, click a button or two and talk, and then click another button or two and something else happens. Nothing like it used to be, but we're still trying to make it as exciting and as present as we can be, because that's what radio is about. It's what's happening this moment.
So you are enthusiastic about radio as I am. What do you think of the stories that people like to give? Radio's dying, radio's dead, nobody listens to radio. It's all, everything's on your phone.
Yeah. Well, certainly there's more competition for the 2 ears that God gave us than there ever has been before. But to be very honest with you, the latest statistics I've seen are that weekly, at least 92% of Americans tune in the radio for something. Mm-hmm. And so that sounds to me like a pretty good majority, if even if it's only once a week. And there are a lot of people where it's many times a day, so it averages out to be at least once a week. 92% of people still tune in the radio. There's many reasons to, and hopefully many attractions, including yours truly, we'd hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
and you.
Thank you. Yeah. Who are you? Not the name, not Chris Warren. Who are you on the radio? On the radio, are you really you? Or is there something on the radio that maybe you change your own personality?
If it's a great question, Mark. If you listen to what I sounded like when I first went on the radio, I was putting on a persona, and I was acting a little bit, which was fine because I was in drama club in high school and all that stuff. So I was acting. And people would say, they'd stand in the studio with me, and I'd turn around after a break and turn the microphone off, turn around, and they go, where did you go? That wasn't you on the radio just now. That's somebody else. But I found out through college and really just a couple of years into my career that being yourself is really what people tune in for. So pretty much what you hear is what you get. I do a lot more preparation these days on the radio and have fun getting ready to do the show than I ever did before. So it's not as much fly by the seat of your pants as it is, knowing what you want to do next.
When we were working together at that point in radio, I mean, frankly, we were doing some crazy things on the radio that you would never do now.
Yeah, exactly. And it was all live, and I don't want to disparage the folks that have turned it into a little bit more, I don't want to say it's canned, but a lot of what you hear on the radio today is not live at that moment. What the smart announcer does today, we really can't call him a disc jockey anymore, so air personality does today, you still have to make it sound like it's at that moment. You still have to sound live. I will often, even though I've pre-recorded the break, when I listen back to it, if there's a hiccup in there somewhere or I've made a mistake, I leave it in there.
Yep.
That's me. That's how it sounded when I did it. I'm not going to redo it just because I misread a word or said something wrong.
We are going to have to break in about 45 seconds, 45 seconds, yeah.
Okay.
So here's the deal. Warren Garling, Warren Garling, Garling, wrote a book called I'll Have to Ask My Mom. It's a great book. It's a really great book. How does somebody, and we're going to do more, but just in case, it's Saturday morning now, in case you have to run out and you have to turn the radio off.
You got to rake the lawn,
Yeah,
understand.
That's right. How can somebody see the book, buy the book?
I self-published it through Amazon.com, so that's the easiest thing to do. And they can look it up by I'll Have to Ask My Mom or by my name, or sometimes you just type in radio and all sorts of interesting things pop up. So, thank you for allowing me to plug it once or twice here. I appreciate it.
Sure. And I went out and I bought the book, and it's a really good book. It really is. Our guest, and we got a lot more, and we're going to get more into radio. Everybody's interested in radio, so we'll talk a lot more about that. Some funny stories. Our guest is Warren Garling, who uses the name Chris Warren on the radio. He wrote the book, I'll Have to Ask My Mom. And he also said, I said, what do you want me to say? Author, radio personality, husband, and father.
Not necessarily in that order.
Not necessarily in that order. And we've got a lot more with Chris, or with Warren, coming right up at 88.3 The Saint. This is so much fun. One of my all-time best friends for many, many years is my guest, and his name is Warren Garling, and he wrote a book called I'll Have to Ask My Mom, A Radio Journey. You were probably, along with our other friend, John Stanley, you probably are, and I guess I'm in there too, one of the longest continuous radio personality, except does your trip to Mississippi?
It probably puts cuts it
asterisk,
in half,
yeah.
Or the little asterisk, exactly, when they put me in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, I've really been in the market, most of my life. Started here, went off to college for a little bit, and then came back here, and then did a little side trip for 11 months to Mississippi. But since 1976, I've been on the radio, here steadily. You mentioned John Stanley over at our old haunt, WGNA. He's still on there weekly, which makes him the longest tenured at any particular station.
Right.
I mean, we're talking over 45 years he's been on GNA, if I'm not mistaken. Or right around 45 years. Yeah.
And another story about John, we should tell him we're mentioning him. He got the job first because there was a radio. At that point, as you said, there's a DJ who came in. At that point, you needed a certain kind of a license. We're not going to get into that. He comes in for his first show. His name is Luke. His first name is Luke. He puts up his license, and he didn't have the little designation that you needed.
Needed in order to.
So all of a sudden, the program director came in and started saying, "I don't think he's going to be able to stay." Hey, Mark, do you know anybody? And John Stanley was on another radio station, which was like a beautiful music radio station called Wish at that point. But
yeah.
Anyway. But let's get back to you. I'll Have to Ask My Mom. It's a book. It's a radio journey. It's really funny.
And you're probably wondering why it's called I'll Have to Ask My Mom.
Yeah.
I guess I should explain that part.
There you go.
To a point. Again, it's more fun to read about it in order. But basically what it comes down to is that when I was offered my first job in radio, I wasn't driving yet. I was 16 years old and didn't have a driver's license, didn't even have a permit. And it was going to be a few months before that happened because if you remember the good old days, you had a better chance at passing your test if you took driver's ed in high school.
Right.
And I was signed up for January of my senior year. So here I am in the summer before my senior year, and they want me to come in 7 days a week, basically, I was on.
Which radio station?
And that was the old WSNY 1240 in Schenectady. So bottom line is when they asked me, I just said, well, I'll have to ask my mom, And it's funny because when I was writing this book, I did not have that title in my head. And I woke up one morning a few weeks ago, just before I was ready to finish writing it. And for some reason, that phrase just popped into my head. And said, there's the title for the book. So my mom read it. We were down visiting her in Fort Myers a couple of weeks ago in Florida. And she was reading the book while I was there.
Oh, cool. Did she like it?
So I heard some giggling. So I think it went over okay. Yeah.
And real quick, then we'll ask you again in about 12 minutes, about 10 minutes. How can somebody buy the book?
They can check it out on Amazon.com, which is a great place to surf for books. There's plenty there, so that's the best place to find.
So there are all kinds of great stories in this book, and I'm going to kind of put you on the spot. What is one story after you finished the book, after you submitted it, after it was, we have the hard copy here, after all that, did you say, I could have put this story in the book, or darn, I wish I had included that. Tell me one of those stories.
Okay, well, actually, it's what we started out the hour with a few minutes ago. I don't know why I didn't figure out. Maybe it's because I forgot how you spell your last name. How I could pass up the story about us first meeting and then realizing that we were fans of each other.
Oh, right.
Which really, when I think about it, hasn't happened to anybody else in my life. I mean, I've listened to a lot of disc jockeys and had a lot of fun with a lot of great personalities, but to find out, for you to find out who I was, and then for me to find out who you were, because I knew you as Mark Lawrence, and you came in as Mark Kaplan to get this job with us. And I said, and for, I don't know, maybe over lunch or something one day, you said something about.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I almost fell off the chair. I said, oh, my God, I used to listen to you every afternoon.
I remember that.
When I first came back here from college.
I was so honored.
And so that's a story that I'd love to tell. I told a lot of my friends who have purchased the book, I said, first of all, if I spelled your name wrong, I'm sorry. And second, and by the way, in the original edition, I don't know if it's in the one you have, I spelled Mickey Mantle's name wrong.
Oh, no.
I know that. And you're going to throw the book
I'm gonna
away
cry.
now and cry. I don't know why the editor didn't pick up on that. I had a friend of mine do the editing. I don't know why he missed that or why spell check missed it, but anyway. But what I was hoping to do is there's now that I've done this and I've had so much fun.
Yeah.
And even in the promotion of it, it's been so much fun catching up with old friends and being interviewed on the radio and in podcasts about it. There's going to have to be a sequel of some sort, another memoir. And so I don't want to tell you too many more of these stories because I hopefully they'll be in the next book. And I'm going to call it something like To All the Friends I Missed Before.
I like that. This is Saint Stories. I'm Mark Kaplan, and our guest is Warren Garling. He wrote a book called I'll Have to Ask My Mom, A Radio Journey. You may know his voice, and you may be saying, Warren Garling, who's that? Well, he uses the name Chris Warren on the radio. So I just want to tell a story, which I told you, and I think you had forgotten about. My first full-time job in radio was because of you, because at that point, Warren Garling was a news reporter, and Warren Garling got sick. And I'm not going to go into all the machinations, but I was one of the people who substituted for him, and when he came back healthy, there was another opening, and the boss came to me and said, hey, basically, you passed the audition. We'll keep you as a news reporter. Yeah. So you were responsible. If you didn't get mononucleosis, I may have not started.
Well, there you go. And you even remember what I had. That's
yes, I
pretty
do.
Cool. Yeah. No, I was out of work for a couple of weeks at least. Yeah, and that was just a crazy time. But I don't even, again, here's something I learned when you're writing a book, a memoir, about how you remember things. It may not be exactly what happened. It's how you took all this information and is how you've recollected it many years later. If I had waited any longer on this, I would have forgotten a lot of the things that did come to my mind while writing this book. But I found out from two different sources, two different people that I write about in the book, well, that's not exactly how I remember it. So I did change one because that editor I was talking about happened to be the newsman on the night that we landed on the moon in 1969.
Cool.
He happened to be in the studio that night, and he went on to be an editor at the Chicago Sun-Times and the Washington Post, and so I figured he probably is a pretty good editor for my book. So he did the editing of it, and he told me that what I was remembering on July 20th, 1969 was not quite the same that he's remembering. So I did fix that in the book. But after the book was out and published, another friend of mine said, no, that's not exactly how I got fired. And I said, oh, man, now I feel bad. And he goes, it's your memoir, and that's what you remember.
So I've wanted to be center fielder for the Yankees. I wanted to be play-by-play announcer for the Yankees. Actually, I applied once to be play-by-play announcer for the San Antonio Spurs. That's another long story. But I've wanted to be a senator from New York State. At some point, you look back and you say, okay, maybe that won't happen. But you wanted to be in radio. At what point did you realize, you know what? I am good. I can pull this off. Was there any switch that went on?
I don't think it's happened yet, Mark. I mean, I do my best and I have fun doing it, but I really don't look at it that way. I guess I figured it out when they kept giving me a paycheck every week, that, hey, I must be doing something right. And I was at one station for 12 years, and it was, and that's when, in fact, when I was let go from that station, decided, thanks to, again, my very bright wife who said maybe radio isn't, where you want to be the rest of your life. Thank goodness she said that because I got into a real paying job and was able to afford to retire last year. But the bottom line is that I within weeks of coming off the radio, I knew I had to be back on the radio.
Yeah.
I knew that it was in me and there was no way I was going to survive if I couldn't do it even for just a few hours a week. And that's what I've been doing the last 30 plus years.
So then let me change the question.
Okay.
How do you know you've done a good show, or how do you know you've done a bad show? When you get off the air, what hits you in your mind that says, that was good, or wow, I wish I could do that again?
Well, back in the days, especially when we were live, it was when the phones were ringing, okay? When somebody calls you up and said, I'm really enjoying your show this afternoon, well, that's what you do it for. You do it to please the audience. And that's exactly why I wrote this book, was to put a smile. If there's a bottom line to my whole career, it's I enjoy making people smile, and if I can actually get an actual laugh out of them out loud, that's even better. But if you smile, it's the way I've said something, the way I've worded something, the way I've played even 2 records back to back, then I've done my job. So I'll leave thinking, okay, there were some good parts of that, and I'll try to make it even better next time.
You say a specific thing every show at the end, and it also says it on your Facebook account. What is that, and where did that come from?
Actually, I found it online and didn't find out until later that it was actually a quote from Dr. Seuss.
Whoa!
It's in a Dr. Seuss book, and I forget exactly which one. I think it may have been the one toward the end of his life that he wrote for adults. And now I've forgotten the name of that. But I used that's another, goes back to your last question. I've had more than one person stop me and say, "I love what you say at the end of your shift every week," and which I won't keep you in suspense any longer. If
I want to know.
I can remember it. It's don't cry because it's over. Smile because it happened. And I had one lady write in, and she said, "My autistic daughter just loves listening to your show." And the way I know it is that she smiles when you say that at the end of every shift that you do, when you say those words, and you've touched her. And I said, well, that's the biggest compliment I can get.
I want to give you time to talk about the book again and how somebody can get it. So maybe you have about a minute to answer this question.
Okay.
If a young person came to you, if anybody came to you now and said, I want to get into radio, what would you say?
I belong to a couple of Facebook groups where somebody posted that question recently.
Huh.
And I guess what I would say today is just go in with your eyes wide open, okay? The reason that I actually lost the only time I ever got fired from radio was the last time I got fired from my full-time gig after 12 years with the same station. And the only reason was I was making too much money. Okay, I'd been there long enough that I was the highest paid air personality on the station. They could hire another 1.5 people for what they were paying me, and that's what they did. So just go in with your eyes wide open. I have done commercials on the side, voice acting on the side. I taught at the radio school for a long time.
You've met a bunch of amazing people.
Yes, exactly. And you have to do a little bit of that on the side. You have to do the record hop now and again, as we used to call them, in order to make a decent living at this. But boy, if it's in your blood, go for it. It's a lot of fun.
Speaking of a lot of fun, Warren Garling has written a book called I'll Have to Ask My Mom. It's a radio journey. It's really cool. It's a nice read. It's a good read. It's a fun read.
Very fast read.
It is. So what if somebody wants to buy it?
If you got a couple of bucks and you want to just call it up on your Kindle, you can do that for like $4 or $5. And if you want to buy the softcover version, it's like $9.95, and it's at Amazon.com.
And if you have any interest in radio, which I think most people do, really, it's really worth a buy. Go for it. It's called I'll Have to Ask My Mom. It's by Warren Garling, Garling, who is one of the nicest people I've ever met and such a good friend. Thank you. It's been an honor. Hopefully you'll be back.
Mark. Well, I hope so. I enjoy being with you.
Thanks. I do too. I'm Mark Kaplan. That was Warren Garling. And treat somebody really well and have a really peaceful day.